is that we can't compare apples to oranges, okay? When it comes to voting rights and the right to vote, the reason why we don't have a lot of restrictions on the right to vote is because, well, voter impersonation is what is generally brought up as the reason for voter ID, because there just simply isn't any evidence of it. And so until there is compelling evidence that there's actually a problem with voter impersonation, the court generally isn't going to find that there can be restrictions on that right. Now, the case that Senator Moranti and a bunch of other people bring up in the past, it's an Indiana case, that was actually a facial challenge, not an as-applied challenge in the Supreme Court. But that being said, I think it's important to clear up the record on this, and I don't see Senator Groney, so I'll probably have to re-educate him on this at one point in time, and I'm happy to do so. But I think that there's an important distinction, and while I'm likely going to vote in support of LB 81, not as amended, but I'm willing to look at Senator Wayne's amendment as well, I think that it's important to throw out the constitutional analysis and some of the different issues surrounding that. That being said, let's be honest, folks, we have to pay for some of these administrative functions somehow. And so I'm interested to hear if you're opposed to LB 81, and you're also opposed to increases in property taxes, how we pay for this administrative function. Somebody has to pay for this. And as a gun owner, the $5 I was willing to pay, I'm also willing to pay the $25 for the next permit. And I know that there are some people that may not be able to pay for that, and maybe we can look at some reasonable accommodations for that down the road, and maybe that'll be Senator Wayne's amendment. That being said, I just wanted to get up and provide some context and constitutional analysis. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Marfeld. Mr. Clark.
Mr. President, on a priority motion, Senator Chambers had moved to bracket the bill until April 18th.
Senator Chambers recognized opening the bracket motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a priority motion to give me an opportunity to speak right now. Senator Groney thought he was smart in what he said. He thinks I don't know that there can be regulations on voting. He thinks I don't know that. He said I should remember it when we debate voter ID and so forth. If he listened to the debates we had on that, he'd know that I know more than he probably ever dreamed of. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than you have dreamed of in your imagination, or worse to that effect, than are dreamed of. Somebody who can't play checkers well is going to try to mess with a chess master. He called me out. Well, he's the chairperson of the Education Committee. I hear fractured grammar. I hear dangling modifiers. I hear split infinitives. I hear double negatives whose intent is not to produce an affirmative from the chairperson of the Education Committee. Physician, heal thyself. I want people to call me out, and if I've made a mistake, to use my cliche, it will improve my imagination, my education. But know what you do when you awaken a panther's ire. You know why I say a panther? Because a panther, there are different creatures who wear that title, even the mountain lion. But most people think of a black cat when they hear panther. That's what you're dealing with here, a black man who is not ashamed of being black, who is proud of being black, who could be prouder if I were blacker. I'm going to apologize for what I am to a bunch of white people who have everything to be ashamed of. Slavery, segregation, discrimination, even right now in this state. The governor calling himself a man of faith and injecting the Catholic Church in our legislation. People who he puts in various positions, before they discharge their duties, they want to run it past the Catholic Conference. You know what I'm going to do this session? I wrote a number of columns for the Omaha Star about the predatory pedophile priests and the rottenness of the Catholic Church, which fit the definition of the whore of Babylon mentioned in the Bible. And I'm going to read them on this floor because the governor, the lieutenant governor, and others have injected the Catholic Church into what we're doing, so I'm going to mash the church's nose. Oh, and I did my research. I have the names of the predatory priests. I had written about Cardinal Bernard Law before they sent him running with his gowns flapping behind him over to Rome, and was put in charge of the second most powerful basilica, and it was named after Mary. And Mary is a mother, and she's famous for the child she brought into this world. And Bernard Law knew these priests were assaulting and raping these children. And then Pope Paul II elevated Bernard Law, ratified his ratty conduct, protected him. And now, here you have Francis being reduced to the position of saying, I hope God will be merciful in his judgment of Cardinal Law. Law should have been defrocked. His name was a joke. Cardinal Law? Oh, we're going to get into the Catholic Church. I remember when Lieutenant Governor Foley got hot about some things I've said about the church and referred to it in the media as vile. I was talking about what these predatory priests were doing. My condemnations of the church were vile. Well, you're going to have a lot of chances to say that. And we're going to discuss it. We're going to see how much y'all believe in freedom of speech on the floor of this legislature, and I want to hear you try to shut me up. What are you going to do? You're going to tell the trooper back there to come put his hands on me? The trooper's going to say, that's not my job. You're going to send the sergeant at arms to put his hands on me? That's not my job. Who will bell the cat? Who will make the panther purr like a pussy cat? Which one of you? Or which of you in concert with each other? These things that we're talking about are of great confidence, of great significance to me. You all think old people forget things, don't you? Well, earlier today, I talked about a philosopher who made a comment. I think, therefore I am, and had begun to explain it. My time ran out. What I intended to do was tie that to the mantra of the greatest philosopher/thinker produced by America, Popeye. I think, therefore I am what I am, and that's all that I am. I'm not even angry. I'm speaking forcefully. It takes more than... You can tell the size of a person by the things that make him or her angry. Look around this room. Anything in here big enough to make me angry? No. But some of the things that are done by little people make me angry. Little people with big power who misuse it make me angry. There is such a thing as what they call righteous anger. That means that there might be a justification for that emotion. But I think there is a more significant proverb that obtains and ought to be acted upon. Anger resteth in the bosom of a fool. When you are genuinely angry, you unseat your brain, you dehorse your intelligence, and you're out there running around without any apparent rule. I always know what I'm saying. I always know what I'm doing. And I always know with whom I'm dealing. I've been fiddling with a legislature for 43 years, and you think I don't know something about a legislature? And I've been living around white people all of our life. All of my life. And when I was a black child, under the tutelage of white teachers, I don't forget what they did to me while I was a child. When I didn't know how to fight, when I couldn't fight, And that teacher knew and yet did what she did. Several of them. I'm not talking about sexual abuse. I don't mean that. I want to make that crystal clear. I mean the humiliating things, the ridicule, the hurting of a child's feelings. And maybe the way that white people treated me when I was a child is what helped produce the man that you have to deal with here now. Because I'm not a child any longer. I can deal with any of you or all of you. When you bring up things pertaining to the Constitution, there should be precision in language. The word constitutional does not mean that what is being discussed is spelled out explicitly in the words of the Constitution. It means that it accords with the principles in the Constitution. That document would be thicker than all of those volumes back there if everything which the Constitution protects had to be written in the Constitution itself. The Constitution is not a statute. Broad principles. It is what's called the organic law. It is the foundation on which other laws, like so many ladders, rest. But they have to have a firm foundation on the Constitution, in the Constitution, or they'll be knocked aside. These things Senator Hilgers knows. So to say that something is constitutional doesn't mean that it is spelled out in the Constitution. It means that it is not prohibited by the Constitution. He knows that. He gets emotional because he's not being his own man today. He's carrying out orders. There are many people in the military who will be given orders with which they disagree, but they'll carry them out. But now
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You may proceed, Senator Chambers.
And I'm going to withdraw this motion. A military person now is not required to carry out an unlawful order. One of the things that might have led to that was when the general officers in the Nazi army gave orders to underlings, and the underlings carried them out, and that was the defense of a lot of these mid-level officers during the Nuremberg trials. I was carrying out orders, but that didn't save them from being hanged. You shouldn't have carried it out. It violated the rules of humanity. It's not written in a statute anywhere that you can't put Jews in a gas chamber. It was not spelled out in any law in any country that you cannot burn them in incinerators. And some of them wound up in the incinerators before they died completely. There is nothing in any law that says you can't take Jews and put them in barrels of cold water in the winter and let them die as the water freezes. There's nothing that says explicitly you cannot take a pregnant woman, tie her legs together, then induce the birthing process while her legs are tied together and study what happens and write about what happens. What they did was so horrific, even though it didn't violate the explicit provisions of laws, that the medical and scientific findings they found through their experiments could not even be made use of. Because of the origin and source, these things could not even be used. Isn't that something? And the governor, he's glad of this. The Nazis created lethal injection. I remember there was a time the lieutenant governor would have been all over that. But he had a higher master than his own conscience. He doesn't know how much I paid attention to him, and we disagreed on a lot. But what I tell people, Foley's wrong, but Foley believes what he believes. He's sincere, but he's sincerely wrong. I knew how often he went over to the church on the corner. Y'all think I don't watch you? He even does that sometimes now. Nothing's wrong with that. Sees everything you do, hears every word you say, every breath you take, every move you make, every smile you fake, every claim you stake. I'm watching. I'm probably the freest person on the floor of this legislature because I can be and will be me. I don't care what the governor thinks. I don't care what the lieutenant governor thinks. I don't care what anybody on this floor thinks individually or collectively. And we're going to fight like scorpions in the bottle when Senator Morante tries to carry out the work of the white people and his name ends in a vowel. I'm going to teach him something about what Italians went through when they came to this country and what Italians thought of other Italians, like what black people think about black people who carry out the work of white people. We don't talk about it all. You need to know. Anybody whose name ends in a vowel is considered suspect. White people know when a black person is being an Uncle Tom or an Aunt Jemima. Latinos know when a Latino is being a Tío Taco.
1 minute.
And Italians know. Why is it that you always find one of these people who belong to a group that is discriminated against to do the worst, dirtiest thing that this society wants? So they can say, well, one of your own, well, something like one of your own is doing it to you. And then he thinks that they love him. They'll give him a job. They're going to let him be whatever he's running for next. He earned it. And maybe he can drop the vowel from his name. You know why I know about that? I learned about that when I was in high school, and I watched. And I didn't know the significance of a name ending in a vowel until I watched all the children whose names did end in vowels. And there were Italians who went to Tech High. And then I asked some of them, and some of them didn't
Time,
know.
Senator.
But it came to them when I asked the question.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Chambers, you recognize to close in your bracket motion.
I'm going to take this time and then I will pull the motion. You all should pay attention to what that bill actually says. You have information from 2 sheriffs pointing out how expensive it is for them to comply with this requirement that the state put into the law. One of the departments has almost 2 full-time employees doing this work, and it can cost $120,000 to carry out all of the duties. There are hundreds of thousands of people involved in some of this stuff who want to get these guns. And maybe the $5 generates $30,000. That's not a revenue producer. I believe in fairness for everybody. I've had disputes with the counties, with the lobbyists for the counties, but that doesn't blind me to a situation where the counties are being treated unfairly. These certificates benefit the person who obtains the certificate. Senator Hilgers, Senator Groney, and these other people, he didn't say this, but they talk about people not being able to afford a pistol. Well, he shouldn't have one. He can't afford a pistol? He shouldn't have one. Or let him go steal one then. Because some of these people who have guns, these people with the NRA who makes fools out of you all say you're trying to restrict the rights of law-abiding citizens. Well, they don't tell you how many people were law-abiding until they got the gun and broke the law with the gun. The gun led them to cease being a law-abiding citizen. You all know better than to talk this stuff like the... You know what? I know what's the matter with Senator Hilgers. He's probably a very religious man. I didn't say righteous. He thinks there should be a 1 in front of that 2, and he has discovered the missing 12th commandment. And I'm not going to tell you what the 11th one is, but the 12th commandment is let people carry guns and don't put any restriction on it. There are restrictions on riding a bicycle, and you can't restrict guns. Those are foolish arguments that you give only because the NRA sent them in here to you. I've been around here long enough to know the origin of these foul amendments and arguments that are given. They were given before you got here. I think the NRA might even have a different lobbyist who runs around here now trying to buttonhole you all because the other one couldn't get the job done. They lied to you, just like your president. And you all swallow it, hook, line, and sinker. They couldn't tell you these lies and have you standing on this floor talking like this about any other issue that comes before us. You wouldn't do it. But they got you. And you go so cheaply, so cheap, so cheap. How can you have respect for people like that? That doesn't mean I have to mistreat you, though. I always say that nobody can treat me better than I will treat them. And I mean that. But when we're talking about the welfare of the public and being fair, to me the word fair applies to everybody and all dealings. And it's unfair when on the one hand you're going to say the cost of this has risen, the value of that has risen, so we ought to raise this amount. But then when it comes to this fee that the county has to charge, the state said it, the state laid out the duty, and they have to do it. Everything else costs more. That, to be carried out, that duty, costs more, but it is not to be handled like all these other issues because the NRA said, guns, guns, guns. And they jump up, yeah, guns, 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 guns. You can't do anything about it. I don't have enough votes as one person to stop you, but I can make it as hard for you as possible. And if you kill this bill, then you're going to tell me what kind of session this is, then I'm going to show you what kind it is. And maybe I'll do differently from the way I used to. Maybe I will do some things from ambush and not notify you and let you find out when I do it. I knew what was going to happen on this one. Mr. President, I want to withdraw that motion.
That motion's withdrawn. Senator Urban, you recognize to close on